How's it going, everybody? And today we are going to talk about garden planning. Have you ever considered planning to build a garden? Are you looking to grow food, maybe add beauty to your home, or just find something attuned with nature? Look no further. Today is 2026, and it is a great time to start here in the spring. Well, we got a little bit of winter left, but who's counting on that? But it is no better time to start. So today we're going to discuss the major assets that you want to consider when you are planning your garden. In many places right now, it's still cold and frost lingers, but that does not mean you can't start getting everything ready now. And in some ways, this is an opportunity to save money or beat the rush of getting materials before others do, especially if you wait till March or April when everybody starts rushing to get plants or getting materials, dirt, whatever you need. You can kind of beat the clock on that. And sometimes you can still find some great sales right now on getting other things that you need. Planting a garden doesn't really take long. It just depends on what you're looking for in the size and scale. So some things to consider. What is the purpose of your garden? Are you focusing mostly on flowers? Do you just want to grow herbs? Or you want to do food? All the above? Well, I'm going to answer that right now. You should do all of it if you can. And the reason why is it is an interesting cycle of life where herbs will help reduce pests, add flavor to your vegetables for food, some stuff that you might like, or you could can tomatoes, things of that nature. And then finally, flowers. Flowers draw in the pollinators, which of course the pollinators will go and pollinate all the rest of your plants, which will give you a tremendous boost to your yield of production. I mean, it's something that everything blends together. Next thing you want to consider is how much space do you want to allocate to your gardening? Do you want to do half of your yard? Do you want to do all of it? Are you limited in space? What type of soil do you have? Is it really rocky and sandy? Is it loamy? Is there a lot of clay in it? There's a lot of things you want to consider on different type of soils. Some are good in default, but sometimes you may have to do a lot of amendments or a little bit of terraforming, which isn't a bad thing, as we have had to terraform to put in blueberries, which means we had to dig down and remove a bunch of the clay and replace it with a different type of soil that met the needs of the plant. So that's just an example. Another thing that you want to consider when you are planting your garden is your sources of water. And the sources of water is probably one of the most vital things that you're going to look at when it comes to planting your garden. The reason because of this is some water is alkaline, some water is more acidic, some water is tap, some water is well, some is rural county type water. There's different degrees of water, and you need to know what's in the water, which will help dictate how you're going to treat everything. So for example, if your water's more acidic, then anything that's more acidic, you probably won't need to amend the soil too much. If it's more alkaline, then that will change the pH over time, so you'll have to add amenities to it, especially things like blueberries. The other thing you want to consider is, do you have room to set up rain barrels? Rain barrels is a quick and easy, effective way to collect water that will have a neutral pH, and it has a lot of the minerals and gases from the air still in the water that help vitalize your plants. Think of it like this. Have you ever noticed weeds suddenly go wild after a rainstorm and grow tall? It's because there's a lot more nutrients in that particular water than the water that we drink. If you're limited on space, there's some other options. Maybe a full garden isn't really up to speed. Well, there's ways you could build shelves, put shelves on fencing, and secure your pots, and you could have all sorts of different planters for herbs, small flowers, even small annual tomatoes that are determinants that only get a foot, 2 foot tall. Those work great. So what if you're in an apartment? Well, do you have a balcony? Do you have an outside area that you might want to be able to put a few things? You can even just do a foot tomato plant if you want. There's a lot of different things you can do. If you have an expansive backyard, how much of it are you willing to use? What are your end goals? Is your end goals to do a lot of food producing to preserve in the future? Or are you looking just to make it really like a park? Now, my grandparents used to do a lot of gardening in town that made it look like a park. My other grandma did a lot of gardening for food production out in the country. So there was still some different end goals of what you were looking at doing. So there is different methods of planting your garden. So there is the vertical method, which we did talk about shelves. So you grow upward instead of across. And there's different things like the stacking planters, as we'll see here. There is also small little stacks that you can do. They're very similar to the stacking planters, but they're just small little trays. There's terracotta pots. There's quite a bit you can do with that. You can even use pallets to build upward. There's a lot of creative ways you can do it. I've seen people anchor pots to fences even, and just going up a chain link fence. You're not limited to much other than creativity and the type of plants. The other methods of planting your garden, no till. So you don't want to till everything up. You don't know where lines are, or your soil is just hard. Well, look no further. You can create a no-till garden, which typically is you lay out like cardboard, and then you build soil on top of that cardboard, which gets rid of the weeds, grass, and then you add your own amendments to that soil, and the plants will focus on that part over going further down. That's a much cheaper method a lot of people like. Then you got the tilling garden, which tilling, you use a tiller, tear up your garden, add amendments to the soil, and that is probably, in my opinion, sometimes people prefer that because it breaks up the soil and you can add stuff in there. But if you don't know what's in your ground, you can test your soil. If you've worried that it's too much old construction, because there's a lot of old houses where they used to just dump their stuff in the ground, there's different ways you can look at it. Another method is raised beds. Raised beds are a growing trend in America. They've been around for a long time, but more and more people are seeing the utility of, especially the grow beds that are roughly anywhere from 3 feet to 4 feet tall. That prevents people from having to constantly sit on their knees or crouch down, that they have now a working space to where they can just manage all their plants from standing position. Those are really good. They also deter a lot of rodents such as rabbits. It doesn't always get rid of moles. There's ways to counter moles, but that is beyond the scope of this. Squirrels is another one that you'll have a hard time, but a lot of the other stuff you can help alleviate. Another method is grow bags or 5-gallon buckets. I know a lot of people that use grow bags, 5-gallon buckets. They've built self-wicking, which is basically they pour water into the bucket, the soil leaches it up, and you only have to do that once a week and minimal coverage there. Then finally, just planters. You got pots, planters, things like that you just put in there. There's some nice, I've seen some 27-gallon pots that you could put all sorts of combinations in there. In fact, we're doing one this year where we're having a determinant in the center and then some small determinants around it and herbs, and we're making it really nice looking, adding a little bit of flowers to it. Things that you also want to consider when you're planting your garden is how much sun do you get? Full sun does not necessarily mean sun from the start of it all the way to the end. There's a misconception of when the sun sets, that's when it's full sun. Full sun is usually 6 to 8 hours. The big thing with that is usually the 1 o'clock sun is where you're going to start running into problems. If you're in a hot area, that heat beating down on your plants is not good for it. A lot of times farmers will grow crops together, such as your corn, because it helps shield each other from the intense rays. But in a garden, you don't have that much luxury, so you have to kind of plan how you want to manage the heat. We use shade cloth 30%, and then you're going to want to figure out how you want to set and anchor the shade cloth. It's really important that you're able to do that, because that will help prolong the life of your plants as well as increase the time that you have before the heat wave hits to get a better yield of crops. Additionally, when you're looking at planning your garden, as we see here in this corner, I have charted out what our garden beds look like in one area. There is a grid here. You can use this grid to kind of determine how you want to build. As you can see, there is some 8x4s, there's some 4x4s, and that's the size of the bed. And what you would do is, for example, a tomato, you'd put the center of one of those foot squares, and then where the dotted lines are, you would put different types of herbs like your basils, your onions, and you want to give them ample space in between. There is a rule that just because the package says you need to space it a foot apart does not mean that you always have to space them a foot apart. A lot of that is for farmers that are doing sowing across fields. But what I've discovered is certain plants, you can have them closer together, especially your companion plants. Tomatoes, I don't recommend having them beyond a foot apart and no less than a foot apart, because of the size that happens with these plants. Peppers are the same way, eggplants the same way. You want to give them ample space, but in between there, you can put herbs. So do not be misguided by the spacing. You can utilize every space you have for plants depending on the type. It's very important to pay attention to what plants can go with your vegetables or your flowers, because you want to be able to offer the best. You don't want to attract pests. You want to be able to detect pests. There's a lot of different things you can plan. And this here, this was just done on a simple graphic design program just to illustrate where we're at. You could use this right now to plan your grow beds, what you're going to build or what you're going to buy, and space them out, and then plan what type of plants you want to put in each one. That's the purpose of this worksheet. Finally, the other thing you want to consider is, do you need to set up trellises, poles, stakes? There's different things for every type of plant. Certain indeterminate tomatoes need trellises. Certain pole beans need poles or trellises. Cucumbers, for example, uses a lot of trellises. There's different things you have to kind of research and then make sure you have the space or build a plan accordingly to that. Then, last but not least, you got to look at perennials versus annuals. Perennials versus annuals is a very big subject. For example, we had sage. Sage is a perennial. Sage starts out really small, but we ended up having sage from 3 years that had a root system that was this thick, this wide, and because it was so large, it was taking up the entire grow bed for just 2 plants. So we had to transplant those 2 big pots. That way we could reutilize our grow bed. So that's one thing you got to be concerned with. Perennials like your rosemary, your thyme, those will come back every year depending on your location or how cold it gets. Those get big. You're going to have to kind of probably decide where you want to put those as a permanent place. Asparagus is one that comes up every year. That's another one that once it's down, it's down. I mean, you can dig them all up, but it's not advisable. A lot of your fruit, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, grapes, a lot of those, once they're in the ground, they come back every year, unless for some reason they die, then you've got a mess there. So you want to make sure that you have everything planned out, and don't be afraid to do your research on the plants. In future videos, we are going to cover seed starting. We're going to cover planning more outside on how you take care of certain problems. There's a lot of different stuff that we are going to cover this year in 2026 in kind of a methodology to help introduce new gardeners to ideas or thoughts that you may not have considered when it comes to gardening. Anyway, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe this video for more content, and we will catch you guys soon. Peace.